Hi folks, and welcome to the Ace Tanker for the HWK 12, or the HWK 12, as its full name is. And this is the Tier 8 German light tank in the tech tree that comes straight after the SP1C, and it shares a lot of similarities with the SP1C as regards looks, at least superficially, but there are some differences between the two tanks, in that this tank has an engine deck, and the SP1C doesn't. This is a very, very flat front, and the front is far bigger than it is on the SP1C. The SP1C basically has sloped armor from the front wheels to the turret. It's sloped all the way up, whereas this one actually does have an engine deck. So there are slight differences between the tank, even though they're both rear mounted and come with 90mm, and that's not surprisingly, it's not surprising because the SP1C at Tier 7 was built by a different company. It was Klockner Humboldt Deutz, along with HWK, a French company, and they built the SP1C based on the French tank, the HWK SP1A. So the SP1C is a different tank built by a different manufacturer. This one was built by HWK. Now Henschel, as the name suggests, you probably are familiar with Henschel if you're into tanks, but Henschel are probably the most famous German manufacturing company of all time, at least as regards vehicles go, because Henschel were set up in the early 1800s. They basically came into existence around 1830, building locomotives and railway cars, and they basically continue to build railway cars throughout their entire history, or locomotives. They're still building them today. The same factories that were started in the 1830s are still building locomotives today. They've built them throughout their history, although Henschel are now owned by a Canadian company, I believe. But Henschel have a very, 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 very interesting history. Apart from building locomotives, they were building locomotives pretty much throughout their history, still were. They were building them throughout World War II, but just prior to World War II in the 1930s, about 100 years after the company was formed, they branched out. They started developing more military vehicles, and pretty much most of Germany's bombers during World War II were Henschel, the Henschel bomber, and all the variants of the Henschel bomber were built by Henschel. They also built tanks. They built the Panzer I. They were involved in building the original Panzer I, and then they moved on to build the Panzer II, the Panzer III, the Panzer IV, the Tiger I, and the Tiger II. So they are a company with a lot of tank building experience prior to this tank. This tank has a one heck of an ancestry when you consider Henschel's history, but this tank was built in the 1950s and 1960s. Now, it was based on an armored personnel carrier. So according to the in-game blurb from Wargaming, this was there was a series of lightweight caterpillared tracked armored personnel carriers called the HWK-10 that were developed by HWK in the 1950s. Now, the machines were created for export, but the first prototype of the HKW-11 armored vehicle was created in 1963. Again, it was an APC, and later 40 vehicles were delivered to Mexico, so it was exported. And now, based on the HKW-11 chassis, the creation of the HWK-12 tank was planned, so the prototype was not built. So that's pretty much Wargaming's history. So this is a paper tank. It only existed in plans. Now, I haven't been able to find those plans online, so I basically don't know whether these are what the plans showed. So I don't know whether or not these are accurate plans or not, but the HWK-12 only existed on plans, and the fact it looks a lot like the SP1C, I don't know. I don't know whether that's, because the original plans did, or because Wargaming decided it would make logical sense for the tank to follow the SP1C to actually look like the SP1C. But as I say, there were two different manufacturers that were basically involved. The SP1C was based on a French tank, and it was built by a French company and a German company, and this tank was based on the German APC. So I might as well go into the real history, because otherwise we'll be here all day. I like to waffle, but anyway, essentially the real history of this tank is based on the HWK-10, which was an armored personnel carrier that was developed in the early 1950s, and it was only developed for export. Only 10 prototypes of the original APC were built, and no one wanted to buy it, and no one was really interested in it apart from Mexico. But Mexico didn't like the HWK-10, so they decided that they were going to go into business with Henschel if and only if design changes were made to the HWK-10. So HWK worked with Sedina, who were the Mexican Defense Department, and 10 new APC prototypes were built, and they were called the HWK 11 or the HWK 11. Now, these 10 were shipped to Mexico, but part of the deal was that Mexico would be setting up their own manufacturing facilities, and they planned to build the APC for itself. So only the original 10 prototypes of the HWK 11 were built in Germany. Mexico built their own factories, their own facilities, and they were originally going to build 350 of these the APCs, but after only 30 were built, they kind of lost interest. It was cheaper to buy APCs from abroad than it was to manufacture themselves in Mexico, which is kind of strange because Mexico is known for, you know, cheap production. But essentially only 40 HWK 11s were built in total, 10 in Germany, the original 10, and then 30 in Mexico. So 40 were built, but they weren't built in Germany. Only 10 were. Now, the original HWK 11 was indeed a tracked vehicle, and it had a turret. It had a forward-mounted turret, and it was armed with a 7.62mm gun. So it was very, very different from the HWK-12 we have in-game as the tank. So as you can see, it was used as an armored personnel carrier. It had a small one-man turret, and it had the 7.62mm machine gun. Now, based on those plans, Henschel then developed the HWK-12 as a tank, not as a light tank. It just happened to be a tank that was light. So around the 1950s, 1960s, most European countries that were developing tanks were focused on mobility and firepower over armor, and the HWK-12 fell into that category. It was considered a tank as opposed to it was considered a tank that was light as opposed to a light tank. Now, it had mobility, it had firepower, it had a 90mm gun, but it was only on paper. It never existed, but that didn't stop Henschel from continuing to develop the tank. So they continued to develop the tank into this, which is the HWK-13. Now, this is a tank we actually don't have in game, maybe for one particular reason. This is the HWK-13 that was developed from the HWK-12. The difference is the HWK-12 only existed on paper, and this was actually built. Two prototypes of the HWK-13 were actually built. Now, it's a very different tank. It's forward-mounted turret-wise, and it comes with a very, very different gun, which is probably the reason it's not in game. This gun is a 20mm Hispano autocannon. So it's an autocannon, but it's only a 20mm. And most, you know, you're familiar with the Hispano autocannons because you'll usually find them on low-tier vehicles in game. I mean, you'll find them on tier 2s and tier 3s in game. So the Hispano autocannon doesn't have a lot of penetration. However, this tank was actually built, and it was built in the mid-1960s as a reconnaissance vehicle. So the HWK-12 on paper was a tank that happened to be light. This was considered a light tank. This was considered a reconnaissance vehicle, and it would probably make a pretty good tier 5 or tier 6 premium tank for Germany if Wargaming were interested in developing one. So the HWK-13, the problem, as I say, is the 20mm autocannon. We'll get to that next picture in a moment, but the 20mm around the tanks we have at low tier only had about maybe 50 or 60 millimeters of penetration. However, this tank was developed in the 1950s, 1960s, and at that stage ammunition had changed a lot. So using the ammunition that was actually available for this gun at the time, I don't know whether it would have been historically accurate ammunition because very little information is known about the tank, but the ammunition would have had up to about 100 millimeters of penetration around about the time this tank was developed and built. So a Scout with 100 millimeters of penetration around tier 6 is actually doable. It is actually doable when you consider, you know, the 75 millimeter gun you might find on the M4 or M6. You know, they only have about 110 millimeters of penetration. 100 millimeters of penetration on a premium tank around the same tier light tank would fit in with the game well. So it would be possible to fit this tank into the game, although, you know, as I say, it's only a 20mm, wouldn't be doing a lot of damage, and the penetration would drop off at distance. So to get the most out of this 20mm at higher tiers, you would have to be up close and personal, but for a light tank that shouldn't be a problem. But the Spanish did have a go at developing their own version of the HWK 13, and they came up with this one. So this is originally the APC, the HWK 11, but they put a new turret on it instead of the original tiny one-man turret, and they ended up putting a 20mm autocannon, same Hispano autocannon on this one. So the Mexicans had their own go at upgrading the tank. So this would be the Sedina HK or HWK 13 reconnaissance tank. So two potential tanks, although I don't think Mexico will ever get its own tech tree in the game, but the tank does exist. So this tank was the German prototype, and this is what the Mexicans did. They changed the turret, but it has the same gun as the prototype. So anyway, yeah, so I think that's potentially another tank in game. And as I say, I'm waffling now, so let's just get on with it. So anyway, long story short, the HWK 12 was a tank that only existed on paper, that was developed on the basis of the HWK 11, which was an armored personnel carrier, and the tank that followed this up was built. The HK-13 was a prototype, but because it's only got a 20mm autocannon, Hispano autocannon, it would need a little bit of tweaking to be able to fit it into the game. But anyway, this tank never existed. It only existed on plans. Now, it's a Tier 8. Now, how does it compare to the Tier 7? Well, it's a logical step up. Design-wise, compared to these two thumbnails, you can see that the HWK-12 is slightly bigger than the SP-1C. It's slightly taller, slightly wider. The SP-1C also has sloped armor from the front of the tank, pretty much all the way up to the turret. There is no engine deck like there is on the HWK-12. The SP-1C's turret is also flatter and wider than the turret on the HWK-12. So even though technically, you know, at first glance they may seem to be very, very similar tanks, there are a lot of design differences between the two of them, because as I say, they were both based on different tanks or different vehicles, and they were both built by different companies. They just happened to both be rear mounted and be armed with a 90mm gun. Now, in game, the HWK-12 is a perfect step up from the SP-1C. So if you're playing the SP-1C, you'll be happy to know that if you enjoy the SP-1C, the HWK-12 is going to be far, far better. If you don't enjoy playing the SP-1C, you're going to find that the HWK-12 is, again, better. It is a logical step up. So we get an increase in DPM, an increase in penetration, an increase in damage. The rate of fire is better. The DPM is better. The shell velocity remains the same. It's a horrible 630 meters per second because the 90mm gun on the SP-1C and the 90mm gun on the HWK-12 is a short-barreled 90mm gun. It's a French gun. So because it's short-barreled, the shell velocity is affected. So, you know, this is not a balancing issue. This is historically accurate. It had slow shell velocity in real life. It also carries more ammunition than the Tier 7. It does more potential damage. The aim time is better. The gun handling is better. The accuracy remains the same. The mobility is better. It's faster top speed. It's got a faster reverse speed. It's got more engine power. It's got a better power to weight ratio. The terrain resistance, unfortunately, is not as good as we're going to see in a moment. The SP-1C actually has better terrain resistance, but the HWK-12 has better terrain resistance while turning. Armor and health, obviously, because it's a tier higher, it gets more health at 1100. The armor is slightly better, but still next to nothing. It's not very good, and the view range is better than the Tier 7. So 410 meters is very, very good view range for a Tier 8 Scout these days, compared to 390 on the Tier 7. So it's a logical step up. Pretty much everything that could be better on the HWK-12 over the SP-1C is better. So you're going to enjoy this tank more than you are the SP-1C, and if you enjoy playing the SP-1C, you're going to find the HWK-12 a pleasure to drive. However, comparing it to the other tanks, let's compare it to some of the other Tier 8 light tanks. The HWK-12 isn't quite as good. I'm only comparing it against the single shot guns up here. I'm not including the Tier 8 Scouts with a autoloader, because they're different tanks, they're different beasts, you play them a different way. So we've got the WZ-132, the Bulldog, the LTTB, the Bulldog 90mm, and the T-92, one of the latest tanks introduced into the game, and we're just going to have a quick look. And what we can see already is that the HWK-12 has significantly less DPM than some of the other tanks. Not significant, you know, compared to the LTTB or the T-92, but it's still quite a lot lower than some of the other tanks. So it's got the worst DPM, but not by a huge huge margin. When it comes to penetration, it's average penetration, 180 compared to the other tanks. Some are worse, some are better. When it comes to alpha damage, again, average. Some are worse, some are better. So penetration, damage, you know, they're not anything special for the tank here, but the DPM is rather low. When it comes down to the shell velocity, this is the biggest issue I have with the tank, especially when I don't play regularly. When I do get in, it takes me a long time to get used to the shell velocity when I'm only playing this tank, you know, once a week or so. But the shell velocity of 630 is significantly worse than any of the other tanks. You know, a hugely worse, far worse than even the 90mm on the Bulldog. So shell velocity means you've got to lead your targets, you've got to aim carefully, you're going to be missing shots at range, because basically if you're not used to playing the tank and not used to the shell velocity, you've got to give so much lead. It's very easy to miss shots at distance, which makes the tank quite hard to snipe with unless it's a stationary target. The ammo capacity is okay, and it does actually have the most potential damage of all the tier 8 light tanks, so potential damage is nice even if the shell velocity is horrible. When it comes to gun handling, again, absolutely nothing special here. It's got about the worst gun handling, even though it's not bad when shooting on the move, during turret traverse or during tank traverse. So you know, but it's not terrible. It's quite similar to the 90mm on the Bulldog. So I won't say that this is a negative. The aim time is again average at 192. It's not terrible, but it's not the best. And the accuracy is the best. So it's got good accuracy compared to the other tier 8 light tanks with single shot guns. It's also got another positive here in that it's got 10 degrees of gun depression, which is quite nice. When it comes to mobility, again, it's not slow. It's got a 65km/h top speed, which makes it average. It's got 23 km/h, which makes it average compared to the other tier 8s. The engine power is the weakest engine power of any of the tanks up here, but because the HWK 12 weighs half what most of the other tanks does, it means it's got an incredibly good power to weight ratio, even though the engine power isn't very high. So 36.1 is significantly better than any of the other tanks up here. Some of them come close, but it's got very good power to weight ratio. This, however, is cancelled out by mediocre terrain resistance. So even though it's got great power to weight ratio, the acceleration is good, the terrain resistance is, you know, over twice as bad on this tank as it is on some of the other tanks up here. So terrain resistance is not good. You will find yourself getting bogged down, losing a lot of speed, a lot of mobility when you get into soft or muddy marsh ground. The turret traverse is the slowest turret traverse, so not a positive. The tank traverse is the slowest tank traverse, so not a positive. It doesn't turn very well compared to the other scouts. It doesn't traverse its turret very well compared to the other scouts, and its terrain resistance is actually, or the terrain resistance while turning the tank is actually okay, but it's not special. I mean, it's average. It's better than some, it's worse than the others. So when it comes to mobility, there's nothing special about this tank either. Even though it's got the best power to weight ratio, the terrain resistance evens it out. So mobility, nothing special. Armor and health, it's got the worst armor of all the tier 8 light tanks, and tier 8 light tanks are not known for having armor, but it's got the worst. It's got the worst turret armor of any of the tier 8 light tanks. It's got 1100 health, which is amongst the highest, but it's the joint highest. I mean, it's only 100 health more than the T92, only 50 more health than the LTTB, and the LTTB can actually bounce shots. It's got armor, and it's got similar health to some of the other tanks. So nothing special here either. The only area where the HWK 12 actually stands out compared to any of the other tier 8 light tanks is its view range, which is a very impressive 410 meters. So from its stats, the HWK 12 has some strengths. Gun-wise, it's got good accuracy at 0.35, it's got good gun depression at 10 degrees, and it's got good potential damage with 50 rounds in the tank at 12,000 potential damage. It's also the biggest strength I think this tank has is the fact it's got 410 meters of view range. So it's got some strengths, but it also has quite a few weaknesses. The DPM is the lowest of all the tier 8 regular single shot guns of any of the tier 8 light tanks. So the DPM, not good. The size of the tank, it's quite a big light tank. You can see that it's, you know, almost as tall as some of the heavies here. It's taller than a lot of medium tanks. It's taller than a lot of TDs. So it doesn't have a very low profile, and but you know, the armor is absolutely garbage. It's got about the worst armor of most of the tier 8 light tanks. So you know, turret armor non-existent, hull armor non-existent. So it's got a few weaknesses, and in every other regard it is mediocre when it comes to speed, mobility, terrain resistance, everything else. It's pretty mediocre. So the biggest issue, or the biggest weak point for this tank is the shell velocity of 630 meters per second, which is absolutely awful. When you're not playing this tank regularly, this is a tank I found that you need to be playing it 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 games in a row so you can get used to that shell velocity, because when you're playing other tanks you're not playing regularly and you hop into the HWK 12, you take some shots at long distance and your shots are landing or aimed maybe 5 or 6 meters behind your target because the target is moving, because you've forgotten how bad the shell velocity is. So while the accuracy is good, taking shots at distance with this tank is very, very difficult, because even while the shot is in the air, if the enemy tank you're aiming at was stationary and decides to reverse a couple of meters, you're going to miss. It's just got horrible shell velocity, which is my biggest pet peeve against the tank, even though it may be historically accurate. Anyway, we are going to go. We are here on what map is this? Highway. We're here on Highway, and I'm mid-tier. I'm a tier 8 in a tier 9 game, only 3 tier 9s on the enemy team, and it's a game I've basically gotten back into the tank in after about a break of 2 or 3 weeks away from the game. So I'm a little bit rusty, as you're going to see from this game. I'm definitely not used to playing the HWK 12 because I hopped into it for its daily double. It's also a day I'm having absolutely horrible connection issues. For some reason my ISP decided to connect me to Paris via Finland, Austria, 3 other unknown connections, and then finally to Wargaming. So my ping is jumping all over the place. I'm having lag issues. I don't know whether they're going to come across in the replay, I ended up having to quit. I logged in to play games, to get videos for you guys, and after 4 games I had to quit because the connection was just so bad. And anyway, this is the first of the 4 games before I quit, and I managed to ace the HWK 12 in this game, but it wasn't a great game. I was rusty, and as I say, had connection issues. But we've pushed up here. You can see a little bit of juddering here because it's just my connection kept on lagging out. I kept on having drop frames. But we've moved up, and none of the enemy teams seem to be coming across this way. I was expecting maybe the KV-13 or the CDC, but enemy teams seem to have a lot of TDs and a lot of heavy tanks, and no one seems interested to have come the 1-2 line. So you can see I'm just slowly edging forward, trying to find victims, trying to get spots, trying to use this 410 meters of view range. Meanwhile, we haven't sent too many tanks towards town. We've got a lot of TDs who haven't left spawn, and our medium tank, the VK, has gone into town along with a couple of heavies, but other than that, not a lot in town. So the other flank is going to look in a lot of trouble very, very soon, and I'm getting a little bit impatient here because the enemy team seem to be camping and we haven't sent very many tanks into town. But we've moved forward. I've spotted the ST1. Now I'm just going to advance and try and get spots for my team. And as I say, I've got 410 meters, but I'm going to be doing most of my spotting at a range of 50 to 100 meters here. So yeah, enemy heavies camping spawn. Oh, this is not good. So many enemy heavies camping spawn. And I know that there's a bunch of TDs going to be sitting on the 9 line, so I'm just spotting T25AT. Did I get spotted in return? Yeah, I got spotted in return. This is not good. So IS-6 looks to have gone... Oh, he's gone ham. Okay, you see the shell velocity. Even though I'm only 50 meters away from the IS-6, how long it took for that shot to reach the target. Shell velocity is horrible. I'm trying to stay safe from the TDs. But, yeah, okay. He goes down to so many of our tanks that are camping the A lines. And I'm just going to move up. Now, 180 millimeters of penetration is enough to go through the side of the Mauerbrecher. Yeah, there we go. So 1 shot in. Now I'm being a little bit cheeky here considering the ST1 has decent gun depression. He's in front of me. I've spotted RT. Mauerbrecher looks as if he's pointing at me now. And there are TDs over to my right, but I don't think they've got shots. So, okay, he's not looking at me. Pop up, put a shot in, and get spotted again. So this is a mistake by me because I should be sitting down and waiting till I fall off, but I get greedy. And I get nailed. I should have waited till I dropped off dropped off radar, but I poked and lost all my health. Huge mistake by me. As I say, I'm very, very rusty. Really wanted to get the RT kill, and ended up paying for it. Got 2 shots by TDs on the enemy team. Okay, Mauerbrecher is now angled. I'm going to have severe problems dealing with the Mauerbrecher at that angle, but our team seem to be dealing damage. I'm getting spotting damage. I'm up to 1700 assistance damage so far. Waited till I dropped off radar, and yeah, I wouldn't have penned him at that angle. I needed a straight flat surface. So okay, get a little bit more assistance damage, and now it's just the ST1. So trying to keep enemy tanks spotted. Wait till I drop off radar, poke. And oh, I'm still spotted. I'm definitely still spotted. No, I wasn't. Okay. And there we go. I mean, snapshotting in this, even though it's got 0.35 accuracy, missed my snapshot. And I get nailed by that T-25. He really has it in for me. He really, really has it in for me. He's set up on that ridge for the entire game. None of our tanks are in a position to shoot him. And I really, really want him to die. But in the meantime, getting more assistance damage. We're up to 3,000 assistance damage now. Just trying to poke, do a little bit of damage, track enemy tanks, keep getting the assistance damage, get spotted, fall back. And finally, the T-25AT goes down. So I know there's a Scorpion G up there as well. SU-122-44 up there as well. Yeah, so I don't really want to poke this position, so I'm not playing well. I took a few shots I really probably didn't need to take because I was just rusty. There's no excuse, I was rusty. I should have waited till I dropped off radar before poking, but one to the spot. Scorpion G is spotted. Look at this. And that shell velocity and that, you have to wait till the gun is fully aimed. We're getting more assistance damage, that's fine. Another 350 assistance damage. And snapshot, don't get that one, but do get the assistance damage. So we're up to 4,000 assistance damage. And yeah, just pushing. Our team are actually winning at the moment, so that's good. Still trying to get assistance damage. So I've done 1,000 damage myself. I've got 4,000 assistance damage. I'm relocating. I'm a one-hit kill. And we're getting another 1,000 assistance damage from the 263 there. And this is where I'm rusty. You can see how badly the shell velocity and the fact I haven't played this tank so long. Completely misjudged that one. Didn't have much to shoot at. So I'm forgetting how to play the maps. I'm forgetting where the dips are. He stopped. So yeah, the shell velocity and my rustiness are all causing problems here. So we've got enemy tanks moving into our spawn. For some reason our entire team have decided to aggregate right here in the middle on the E line. No one is defending spawn, and that's going to cause problems if the enemy team decide to cap. And had a hint of a shot at the KV-13, and once again shell velocity, lack of a tank outline. I'm not going to get any shots on these guys. So there's yeah, we've got tanks pushing into enemy spawn even though enemy spawn is being defended. We've got tanks pushing into our spawn, and Scorpion G is still around. So I've got to go back to defend. Our Jagdpanther is going back to defend. I don't know what our T-10 is doing. But yeah, we're being capped out. One tank in spawn, two tanks in spawn capping out. So I'm probably about the only person who can do anything about this at the moment. Our T-10 is in a position where he's still focused on enemy tanks up along the 9 line. He's ignoring our spawn. So only the Jagdpanther is here to help me, so I'm kind of trying to do this alone on 250 health. KB-13 left the rear of his tank poking out, and that tank is a tinderbox. Love engine shots on KV-13s. If you want to get fires, that's where you shoot them. But get another shot in. He's not quite hidden. I'm a little bit worried that the okay, there's the Bulldog. Okay, track the KB-13, unfortunately. Okay, and okay, I don't know why the Bulldog didn't fire, but miss a shot. And, oh, I don't know, maybe it's my lag. Maybe my lag is helping me, but for some reason the Bulldog didn't kill me. He shot at where I was, you know, I was about 3 or 4 seconds earlier, but we've just taken out the Bulldog. There's kill number 1. So maybe the lag was helping me there. But we've defended. I'm up to almost 6k assistance damage and almost 2k of damage done myself. Our T-10 is moving back, and now we just have to defend because we're now losing. It's 3 versus 4, and the enemy team have a Patton left, although we have our T-10, so I don't know, why are you advancing, T-10? He's advancing against enemy tanks that are all camping the spawn, and there we go, he's just been wiped out. That's 3 tanks that have shot him in quick succession. I don't know why he had to push forward. So we really needed him, and our one advantage of having a T-10 on a lot of health is now gone. CDC gets spotted, put a shot into him, and you can see the slow reload time, the slow DPM of this tank. We fire another one, that's probably gone in. Yes, it has. Critical damage caused. So AMX CDC is still alive. 180mm of penetration, not enough to deal with the Oni. So put a shot in anyway, but yeah, all of a sudden, where's my Jagdpanther gone? Alright, so our Jagdpanther has now decided he's going to push down alone. Yes. Okay, we needed to stick together, but our team decided that, yeah, best option is to push together. Our push one by one against superior enemy tanks, superior enemy guns, superior enemy numbers. Our Jagdpanther's still on a lot of health, but maybe if I can spot tanks in the middle, he can get side shots. But why he's pushing, I don't know. But just gonna move up here, see if I can spot anyone. It's not looking like a win. I'm a one-hit kill pretty much to every enemy tank. There's a Scorpion G, and look at the shell velocity. Yeah, I hate this tank. I really, sometimes the gun, unless you're used to playing it and you've played a few games in a row, it's a pain. The shell velocity is a pain, and the gun has to be aimed in fully. So he's firing blind, but we put one shot into the Scorpion. He's still maybe two high rolls, 3 shots to kill. CDC should be a one-hit kill. Don't know how much the health the Patton's on, and the Oni is almost full health. So yeah, I'm relocating. I can't defend, and yeah, I don't know what else I could have done. So Oni, no point in taking a shot here. I'm not going to take a shot. Don't want to risk taking a shot. So we're going to accelerate down the hill, get some speed, try and get some distance. The only strength I have I can use at the moment is my 410 meters of view range. So going to try and put distance between myself and enemy tanks. I've got a feeling that the CDC is flanking. He hasn't been spotted in some time. I'm not going to bother taking shots at the Oni. It's the CDC who's flanking is the one I want, because I know he's a one-hit kill. There he is. So we're aiming. He's gotten into cover, but we're planning to take out the CDC. And the Scorpion, in the meantime, has appeared on the minimap, and that's bad news. So I was hoping the enemy team were going to cap. Scorpion is there. I was hoping to take out the CDC from stealth, but that's not going to happen. Scorpion's sitting up on that ridge. He's going to have shots on me. So I decide I'm going to take out... Oh, I got spotted. Okay, we take out the CDC. Somehow managed to bounce the Scorpion, put a house between myself and him, but where's the Oni? Can I get into cover? Can I get into cover before the Scorpion reloads? And it doesn't matter because it's the Patton that got me from distance. So yeah, first game back after a break from World of Tanks. Terrible connection. My ping, my lag was all horrible, and I only managed a few more games before quitting for the night. But even though it was a defeat and a disappointing end to the game, it was my, which mark of excellence? 2 marks of excellence. It was my second mark of excellence on the tank, even though I don't go for these. Picked up my ace, first ace in the HWK 12, picked up Defender, and picked up Patrol GD. I spotted most of the enemy team, and yeah, I mean, I'm going to bring you every game, every first ace, regardless of whether it's a win or defeat, regardless of whether or not it's a good game or a bad game, you just get the first ace. But we finished top on XP with 940, 2,548 damage done myself with 2 kills. However, we also managed to pick up almost 6,000 assistance damage just from spotting. It's just a shame it couldn't have been a win. We picked up 86 defense points, and as I say, happy with the damage done, happy with the assistance damage. Didn't have to fire any premium, ended up earning 46,000 credits on a premium account, and with the heroic resistance and the rewards thrown in, I ended up actually acing the HWK 12 with 1455 XP. So a 1455 XP game, not too bad. I don't like the tank, but it's done, it's dusted. I don't feel I should play it anymore. I don't really have a reason to play it anymore. I just haven't decided whether or not I'm going to sell it, because I didn't hate the tank, but I just didn't particularly like playing it. I mean, if I want to have fun, pretty much almost every other tier 8 light tank is a tank I'd rather play than this one, you know, other than the Batchat 12T, which is horrible. But yeah, I don't like the tank, but I don't particularly hate it. I think it can do a job. It's got great view range, it's got decent accuracy for a tier 8 light tank, and you know, it's the camo rating doesn't seem to be too bad on it either, even though it's bigger than most of the other light tanks. So I don't particularly hate it, but yeah, I'm not a fan. So anyway, HWK 12, first game back playing World of Tanks in some time. Bad connection, dropouts, but it was the only ace I managed to pick up in a sequence of about 4 games after a long break from the game with bad connection. And yeah, you've got it. So it's been a while since I've done a Watt video. I keep on promising you World of Tanks videos, so I'm going to do my best. I've got a period now where I've got about 4 or 5 hours free, so I'm going to do as much recording of Watt videos as I can over the next few hours as I can, and hopefully you'll have some Watt videos over the next few days. So thank you guys for watching. I'll see you next time.